listener production.
Hi, Sasha Barbagat with you. Welcome to The Briefing. Youth crime has very quickly become a hot button issue right across Australia, with young kids being accused of violent attacks, carjackings and home invasions. Yesterday, Victoria's Labor government announced it'd be following the footsteps of the Liberal National Party in Queensland and will look to introduce adult time for violent crime.
Having this intervention of adult time for violent crime is a significant consequence. It does break that cycle of repeat violent offending.
Our chat with the Victorian Premier Jacinta Allan about the proposed laws and why they are going against many experts when it comes to young offenders is coming up in the second half of this episode. First, it is time for the headlines with Chris Spyrou on Thursday, the 13th of November.
Hey Sash, and to you listening. We're starting in the US, where both Democrats and Republicans have released documents from the Epstein files. The Democrats kick things off by putting out a bunch of emails which suggest Donald Trump knew about the conduct of sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. In one of the emails from 2011, Epstein told his co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell that Trump had spent hours at his house with one of his victims and was, quote, the dog that hasn't barked.
In another email the disgraced financier sent to Trump's biographer, Michael Wolff, in January 2019, about 6 months before Epstein's death, he said the US president, of course, knew about, quote, the girls. Since that release, Republicans in Congress have dropped 23,000 pages from the so-called Epstein files. What's in them, we don't quite know yet, Chris, because at the time of recording this, major news outlets in the US are still combing through those documents.
Yes, but we have heard from the White House. The press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, has issued a statement saying the documents released by the Democrats were chosen selectively to create a fake narrative to smear the president. She says the emails reference his interactions with the late Virginia Giuffre, who repeatedly said Trump was not involved in any wrongdoing and couldn't have been friendlier to her in their limited interactions.
The Liberal Party will meet again this morning to formalise a position on its decision to dump net zero targets. MPs agreed overwhelmingly to walk away from the policy position during a marathon 5-hour meeting in Canberra yesterday afternoon, but say Australia won't back out of the Paris Agreement if the Liberals do return to government. But what they're doing is effectively backing out of the UN Pact because that says signatories can't water down their targets to drive down greenhouse gas emissions. So how they plan to get around that is yet to be seen. It was just 4 years ago as well, Chris, that the coalition committed to achieve net zero by 2050 under then PM Scott Morrison.
Yes, so as to what happens next, as you mentioned, there will be another meeting today in which the party's policy position will be formally agreed on and released. Then on Sunday, the Liberals and Nationals will sit down for a joint party room meeting to agree on a new policy platform in this space. The question is then, if they do want to have any sort of position on the environment and climate change, what is it if it's not net zero? So the Shadow Energy Minister Dan Tehan spoke after the meeting yesterday afternoon, claiming the party wants to prioritise affordability.
Energy affordability must come first and must be the focus along with reliability. We have to be serious when it comes to addressing emissions reduction, because we want to be able to show very clearly that this is an issue the whole party room takes seriously.
So it sounds like, Chris, from that comment that they're angling for people's votes. They want to prioritise how much it costs us and the Australian government and how much we can rely on energy as we look to transition to a more renewable future. One of the frontbenchers who spoke in favour of keeping the target, now it's believed from inside reports about 17 MPs came out in support of keeping net zero. One who was very passionately in favour was WA frontbencher Melissa Price. She claimed the Libs would lose their seats and the party would become a laughingstock if they did dump this target. So my question is, you know, we saw in 2022 when Anthony Albanese was first elected and he defeated Scott Morrison, that a lot of the results from that were because people weren't happy with the coalition's position on climate change, right? They vowed to learn their lesson. Then in 2025, in May, Anthony Albanese once again swept to power. And, you'd think that they said they were going to learn their lesson. And with this argument and with this conversation that they're having and with changing up the policy, it doesn't seem that they have.
No, I think what they're saying and the way that they've spoken about it is that they want to offer the Australian public a different choice because, they'd been accused of being Labor light. So what they're saying here is, hey, look, we can be the party of giving you another option. So, yeah, that's what they're throwing out at us. It'll be very, very interesting to see how the policy actually forms and what it formally looks like and how they can come to some sort of agreement with the Nationals come Sunday.
Australia's Electoral Commission has come out to say it has no power to block neo-Nazis from running in elections. It comes as the National Socialist Network claims it is close to securing the numbers needed to form a political party in New South Wales under the name White Australia. Now, we did look into this group and its aspirations to infiltrate public office in Tuesday's deep dive, and the expert we spoke to, Kaz Ross, warned we should not underestimate them.
I think people misjudge Nazis at their own peril if they think that they're stupid or this is never going to happen or they're overreaching. They have some very smart people in their leadership, and they have people who are very politically savvy.
Now, the link for that, Ep, if you did want to have a further listen, is in the show notes.
Now, the AEC has come out to say it can't block parties from running based on their ideologies or for having candidates with criminal backgrounds. There are rules, though, that stop people who have been convicted and sentenced to a year or more jail time, while the New South Wales Electoral Commission could have a broader scope to block the party based on its racist and offensive ideologies.
Yeah, the AEC can actually only block parties with names that were, quote, obscene, frivolous or vexatious, I love that word, vexatious, were more than 6 words long or could be mistaken for another party. And just quickly, while we're talking about the NSN, notorious Melbourne neo-Nazi and the leader of the group, Thomas Sewell, has made another bid for bail. Now, a reminder, he's currently behind bars accused of dozens of offences, and this is over the ambush of a sacred Indigenous site, Camp Sovereignty, back in August, an incident which left 7 people injured. Now, a judge is yet to rule on his application. That's going to happen today.
An Aussie fortune teller has been arrested and charged, accused of carrying out a $70 million fraud on vulnerable clients. The 53-year-old woman from Sydney, who claims to be a feng shui master and fortune teller, allegedly targeted people in the Vietnamese community. Police say she convinced them to take out loans based on a prediction that there was a billionaire in their future and took a share of that money for herself. The fraud is estimated to have totaled almost $70 million.
And during her arrest, detectives seized financial documents, mobile phones, luxury handbags, a 40-gram gold bar worth $10,000 and $6,500 in casino chips. Now, this self-described fortune teller has been charged with 39 offences. She's been refused bail and she will be facing court again in Sydney today. A younger woman was also charged over this plot. She's been accused of helping the 53-year-old carry out this alleged fraud. And detectives believe the pair were part of a wider, highly sophisticated criminal syndicate that's operating across Sydney.
And sweet baby Bobby Owen is continuing to emotionally manipulate us, Sash, and I am so here for it.
I promise you, I'm always there.
Yes, that is the sweet sound of Robert Owen paying tribute to his dad Steve in his latest Dancing with the Stars performance in the US, being joined on stage by his sister Bindi right at the end, both standing hand in hand as old videos of their family played.
Appearance by his sister, Bindi.
Yes, he danced the foxtrot, which is such a lame dance, but it is the same dance that Bindi performed for her father on the show 10 years ago. 10 years ago is when Bindi Owen won Dancing with the Stars US. I know it's been 10 years. Wild. And Bobby actually did such a great job. He earned himself a perfect score of 40 from the judges.
Your passion and clear, investment in Dancing with the Stars US is impressive.
Thank you so much.
Now, I won't call him Bobby. I'm going to call him Robert because he made it very clear during the I'm a Celeb promos that he wants to be called Robert Chris.
Sure, okay.
It's not the first time Robert has paid tribute to his family on the show. Last month, he brought out his mum, Terry, at the end of a number he dedicated to her, which sounded a little bit like this.
'Cause you'll be in my heart always.
Oh, it's heaven, isn't it? It is heaven, such a Baba cat.
Oh, man. We know Steve Irwin was obviously an incredible
Iconic.
icon, not just here in Australia, but across the world. But just be yourself, man. Why do we have to keep dragging poor Steve into it? Let him just live on, in our memories.
Yes, I mean, he will live on in our memories and now on the Dancing with the Stars US stage forever. For time whatever that phrase is, that's the one I'm going with. Now, look, that is it for headlines for today. Coming up next is my chat with the Victorian Premier Jacinta Allan on why they're going to be trying to bring in adult time for violent crime. Stick around, that deep dive is coming up for you next. In a surprise move, the left-leaning Victorian Labor government has announced a new policy on youth crime, adult time for violent crime. And what that means is that kids as young as 14 who are found guilty of committing offences like home invasions, machete attacks and aggravated carjackings wouldn't be sentenced in a children's court where they face a current maximum of 3 years jail, rather the adult court where they, in extreme cases, could face life behind bars. And while it follows a machete ban and tougher bail laws, this isn't a position often taken by Labor, which errs more on the side of deterrence and rehabilitation for children in the legal system, amid warnings from experts that a hardline approach to youth crime rarely works. Now, as Victoria prepares to head to a state election a year from now and after the Liberal National Party in Queensland swept to victory on a similar policy platform, is this just a play for votes? Or is the government confident that treating young offenders as adults will help drive down a perceived spike in kids committing crimes? I caught the state's Premier Jacinta Allan shortly after the announcement yesterday. Here's our chat. Premier, welcome to the briefing. The threat of life sentences is pretty significant. What's the thinking behind that?
Well, this decision has been informed by listening to too many victims of crime here in Victoria, and they're also telling me very clearly that there's not enough consequences in the justice system for this very serious, repeat, brazen offending that too many people are experiencing. And that is why Victoria is introducing adult time for violent crime, where the courts for a range of crimes will treat children as adults, and the outcome will see an increase in the likelihood of jail and longer sentences.
Now, there's a general feeling of surprise that a Labor government in Australia would implement a policy like this. Can you understand why some people are feeling that way?
What police tell us is that this is a new kind of crime that needs new interventions, new responses, and it also comes against a backdrop of a really complex changes in our society. So we know that this is new crime. We know that too that it is brazen, and I know that it is doing a significant amount of damage to families, to communities across our state. There are governments around the country that are working through how to respond to this complex issue. And here in Victoria, as a result of listening to many victims of crime, hearing that there's not enough consequences as a result for those who are committing the crime, that we have taken this decision. Because for some people who commit this brazen, violent offending, jail does need to be the outcome for this group of people.
Now, you mentioned other jurisdictions there. Obviously, the one that springs to mind for a lot of people is the LNP in Queensland, their adult crime, adult time policy. How much of this policy is informed by theirs?
The fact is that governments are working through the complexity of this challenge in rising youth crime, brazen offending, changed behaviour too. And here in Victoria, alongside some further things we'll have to say around more work to be done on early interventions, we know that kids need boundaries. We know that we need to keep them connected to schools and to communities and to families. But for some, a smaller number, but for too many, we are seeing this repeat pattern of behaviour of brazen, violent offending that needs to have consequences. And as a parent, I know that kids need to know that there are boundaries. Kids need to know that there are consequences if they do the wrong thing. We also know through the work we've done here in Victoria in our youth justice system that when you deliver programs and support to young people who are in our youth justice corrections facilities, that there is a huge amount of work that goes into keeping them connected to education, getting them to finish their year 12, to start a university degree. So those are programs that we run right now in our justice facilities, in our youth justice facilities. And there is an opportunity there to build on those programs, and we'll have more to say about further work on early intervention. But today I'm very focused on dealing and responding to what victims have told me, which is there needs to be consequences.
Now, critics of this new announcement say that a major driver of the quote-unquote youth crime crisis in the state is this issue of reoffending. How is that being addressed in these new laws?
Well, that is exactly right. There is this pattern of offending and reoffending, and we know that there is a group of young people who are continuing to engage in increasingly violent crimes. And having this intervention of adult time for violent crime is a significant consequence. It's a significant intervention. It does break that cycle of repeat violent offending, and it does so by shifting a number of these brazen and violent offences into the adult court system, where the courts will treat the young person, as an adult. And we know, because the data tells us, that when people are tried for these sorts of crime in that system, the sentences are longer. The jail time is more likely.
The data also shows us that the idea of throwing a kid in prison also gives them more incentives to remain in the cycle of criminality as well, doesn't it?
Something has clearly gone really wrong for a small number of young people, for them to engage in what is just shocking violent behaviour. Something's really gone wrong in their life. And that's why we know the best way to prevent this is to put boundaries in place before this behaviour happens, keep them connected to schools, to communities, to families. But we have seen for a group of young people, they've not had those boundaries put in place. They've not seen that there are consequences for their behaviour. But also we need to remember the large number of young people who are also victims of these crimes. And I've met with families whose kids can't sleep, whose kids need mental health support because they were sleeping in their bed when someone broke into their home with a dangerous weapon. Kids who are related to other kids who've been brutally murdered. Like, we've also got to remember that kids are victims as well, and they need to be protected and supported. And one way of supporting them is to break this pattern of violent, brazen offending.
And so when we think about breaking the violence and then the cycle here, you did mention there are supports that are available within the prison system. How effective have those been? Because we are seeing people in the state, we are seeing young offenders in the state leaving prisons and coming out and continuing to offend. Does that not raise some alarm bells that the systems and interventions in place are just inadequate at the moment?
As I said before, there are a range of programs, education programs, training programs that are about supporting young people. But we always can do more, and I will have more to say about the further interventions, both within and outside of the corrections system, to put in place those boundaries that are so important for these kids. We know for a whole bunch of young people, their disengagement with school is a very early indicator of the risk of them going down a life of criminal behaviour. So what more can we do to keep these kids connected to schools? And I know this as a parent, it's a challenge. You've got to keep these kids connected and put boundaries around them. But right now, too many victims tell me that there is not enough consequences for this repeat brazen violent offending that is causing such devastating harm to too many people.
Will this be a first port of call, or is this the threat of life sentence something that's going to be, thrown in the face of repeat offenders or someone who's on the serious scale of things? In what circumstances will this be an option for a young offender?
Well, this will not be. This will be taking a bunch of brazen violent offending crimes and putting them into the adult court system.
First-time offenders?
Well, any offender that is charged and is going before the court. And so this is about making very clear that there are consequences. And this is one of the things, your point is a really good one. You'd think years ago or couple of years ago, there'd be an escalation. What we are seeing is some young people are going straight into these very brazen, violent offending. And so it is about stepping in and being very clear that there are consequences in place for this brazen and violent offending.
The opposition leader, Brad Batten, has accused you of chasing headlines with this announcement and that Victorians can't trust you to deliver on this promise. With an election looming by this time next year, the Victorians will be heading back to the polls. There is this idea that perhaps this is a play for votes. What's your response to that?
I'm determined to do everything I can to keep our communities safe. And I do this in the context of listening to many victims of crime, working with Victoria Police. So they're the Victorians I'm listening to, not a Liberal opposition here in Victoria that opposed the bail changes, the toughening of the bail changes that we introduced into the Parliament earlier this year, who opposed our anti-hate laws here in Victoria. I'm listening to victims, I'm listening to Victoria Police, and determined to do everything I can to keep our community safe.
As much as there's listening to victims and to police, there's also a sense that perhaps we're not listening to the experts in the space here who do say that adult penalties for children just doesn't work.
Well, if you look at the programs that I've spoken about that are run across our correction systems, we see that they can make a difference. But I think it is very important to listen to the victims.
They can make a difference, but are they making a difference?
Yes, they are. And we need more of them. And I'll have more to say about those programs that are about early interventions. But let's be absolutely clear here. There are too many victims of crime. Too many other kids are having their Year 12 studies disrupted, are having their schooling years disrupted, are being hospitalised because of the violence that they're experiencing. They're the Victorians that I'm focused on and supporting and making it very clear that there has to be consequences for this crime.
Now, before we let you go, the federal opposition leader Susan Lee not too long ago referred to Melbourne as the crime capital of Australia. Now, the stats don't exactly back her here, but there is a feeling among many Melburnians and indeed Victorians that crime has gotten out of hand under your government. What's your message to those people who might be listening to this podcast?
Well, I'm listening to those victims, and I know that many people in our community don't feel that Victoria is safe enough, and that is why I am determined to do everything I can to improve the safety here in Victoria. And that starts with having stronger, tougher consequences for people who engage in brazen, violent offending.
Premier, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Chris.
That was Victoria's Premier Jacinta Allan speaking with me there, and that is it for this episode of The Briefing. If you enjoyed this chat or learnt something new, why not flick it over to a mate? And while you're there, leave us a rate and a review. I'm Chris Spyrou. I'll catch you next time.